Hello and welcome to the Undercut Podcast. I'm your host this evening, Jesse Billington, and we're back to review the 19th round of the 2025 Formula One season, the United States Grand Prix. To do this, I'm joined by Thiemo Albus Daly. How are you?
I'm funded, I think, because for the first time in a long time, I feel like it wasn't a bad American Grand Prix we watched over the weekend, but it wasn't a classic that we've come to expect with COTA. So I'm processing that. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Had a flat out weekend, climbed Snowdon with my girlfriend and some other friends. Um, Out and about, but also it was a weekend where you could fit other things in around it because all the racing action was late in the evening, so it was a perfect weekend to do that sort of thing. But yeah, when it comes to Grand Prix, um, an interesting one. There was a fair bit to take away in the grand scheme of things from the Grand Prix. The sprint was exciting, but that's because it had crashes in it, so it sort of appeals to the inner
So
child.
the first corner and maybe the 15th lap were exciting, and the rest of it, yeah, like you say, it's kind of there's elements, but it's more what you take away afterwards, which is weird.
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of weekend when it comes to the overall racing. We'll dive into it, we might as well. We'll get some news out of the way first. And we'll start with George Russell's Mercedes contract, which we were initially sort of positing that this was going to be a 1 year affair, but it seems that it's going to be a multi-year contract actually as he moves forwards.
Yeah, he was asked about it prior to the weekend, and whilst he didn't, as many drivers don't, reveal how many years the contract is for, he confirmed it was multi-year, which we were a little surprised at, not because he doesn't deserve it, just because we're used to Mercedes only handing out 1 year contracts to anyone that isn't Lewis Hamilton. So it's good because it shows that Mercedes do have belief in him, but I also do wonder what the opt-out clauses entail, because we talked last week when the news came out that a 1 year deal would be sensible. See how they do next year with the new regulations, and then if it's terrible, he can jump ship pretty easily. And then naturally, as is the way, we turned out to be wrong about that, and it's now having to be spun in a different way, which I think I've done an all right job in managing them.
Mm. I think I don't know if it's multi-year in a one plus sort of scenario where he still has options
Mm.
taking future years. Again, opening up for if that Mercedes isn't as good as it should be, could be, might be come next season. So there's a lot to still be seen when we get to those points in time. But I think it's a good sign of Mercedes' faith in George, at least if they're offering
Mm.
those options to stick around. They're obviously very pleased with the efforts he's been putting in, and obviously the sort of position that he would be able to uphold in that team moving forwards. If they do find themselves on the right strategies and the right sort of build lines moving forwards with the new car, they see him as someone they can really build the team around and really sort of utilize to his full potential. So I think for him, this is a good long term sign. And I think for Mercedes, this is a fairly good long term sign if he was willing to go into that contract and say, yeah, I'm willing to go with a bit of distance to this. So all around positive news.
It's one of those pieces of news we're happy to be wrong about because we were advocating for it being multi-year in the first place, and we were always just wondering why it wasn't the case. So it's nice to be wrong for a good reason.
Yeah, and in more good news, Chloe Chambers joins the Formula E women's test with Mahindra, and Gabriela Yelkova returns to drive for Porsche as well. So some more good news as the Formula E women's drive test sort of fills out even more so.
I'm just happy Mahindra went for a real woman to test drive the car and didn't think AI could do it. So it's positive steps all round.
Very true indeed. Meanwhile, when it comes to Formula One and its ongoing broadcasts, it has a new home in America from 2026. Every Grand Prix will be shown live on Apple TV. Essentially, they'll be getting what I think is the F1 TV style coverage. So their presenters host that package, but it would just be going out on Apple TV. Apple TV itself rebranded recently from Apple TV Plus just to Apple TV. But that's by the by. But there we
Not
go.
that that makes too much difference to us, as we won't be watching it anyway, unless we're in the States and decide we need to get the subscription. But it's a shame in some ways, I think, that they're not getting a new broadcast team, or at least for the presenting side of it, because I know that, say, in the UK for Channel 4, you've got the F1 TV commentary and obviously the footage, but they've got their own presenters and they do their own thing. So I was thinking maybe it would be that kind of a deal because that would make sense. But this also makes sense, I suppose, and is a softer way of seeing how viable it is. I don't know how long the agreement's for. I don't know if they said, I can't recall, but maybe just a safer way of launching it, seeing how popular it is. in terms of getting the subscriptions moved over to there. I'm not 100% sure what platform they show on at the moment in the States, but it's the safe way of doing that, I suppose. Sort of investing time and money into bunch of presenters. It's kind of maybe similar to what Fox did with IndyCar this year, and we've made some changes. We do some things, but then we take a look after that first season, and then really start pumping money in to make it a bigger, more American style thing.
If you're in America as it stands, oh God, I don't want to buy tickets. You watch it on ESPN. So I guess I know ESPN at the moment just uses the Sky commentary, possibly.
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
odd.
It's like most of the English-speaking countries that aren't English.
You
You just get lumped with Sky.
But if you've got access to the F1 TV coverage, you'll still get the F1 TV coverage, despite the fact that in America it's now just going to be Apple TV. But anyway, that's by the by. It doesn't really impact us, and I don't know how many American listeners we still have on this. But anyway, better news though when it comes to the United States Grand Prix is the fact that it's got a contract extension, much like we've seen with a great many of the circuits we've been to this season. There have been very lengthy contracts handed out, and we'll be racing in Austin, Texas until 2034. So clearly, Stefano Domenicali sitting down with the rather unfortunately named, what's the chap called who runs
Epstein, isn't it?
It's something Epstein, not the best surname to have at this point in time, but yes, not related to the problematic Epstein, we should point out. But yeah, we'll be racing in COTA until 2034, which is good news because the circuit is looking to develop some new hospitality overlooking turn one, essentially on the, I think it's the outside of turn one. They're going to be building a new sort of residential or semi-residential complex that will host luxury sort of viewing figures. And yeah, that's going to be interesting. But at the same time, they have some lovely big open grandstands there that offer like proper hardcore fans of the motorsport the chance to sit there and enjoy the racing. So yeah, I can't see that going down particularly well. A bit like when they sort of flattened the outside of Maggots, Beckett's, and Silverstone and built a load of very terrible looking apartments.
Are you implying that people in charge of Formula One and developing in the future are only in it for the money?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm implying. Anyway, moving on.
Oh, good. I just want to make sure I didn't misunderstand you. Good.
Moving on before I make up the concrete foundations of that new development, we'll jump into our team by team analysis, and we'll start with Constructors Champions. They're still at the top of the list for us. McLaren, Piastri qualified sixth and would finish fifth. Norris qualified second and finished second. This is only for the Grand Prix. We haven't got the stats for the sprint down here. And yeah, Thiemo, I'll let you lead off with this one.
Yeah, Piastri's still in a bit of a funk. We were saying ahead of the weekend that he needs a clean weekend, and well, that didn't happen, but quite short. He's had more races now off the podium in the last three Grand Prix than the rest of the season combined, which is both impressive and not good at the same time. And Norris himself remained winless since Budapest, which is also impressive, but not in the way he would want it to be either. We've got some hearty discussion on the sprint, so I can't politely disagree with you just until you've made your points, but it's not going McLaren's way too much since the summer break. Like, I know they wrapped up the constructors title, but it is very curious that they potentially are in a position, and we'll talk about this more with Mac later, that both drivers who obviously had to contribute to winning this constructors title by such a massive margin could then lose the drivers title.
Yeah, this is the interesting bit, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. We'll start with the GP. Piastri failed to find much pace with his strategy, but didn't lose out on too much points-wise to Norris, really. I think he was lucky that Charles Leclerc held him up as much as he did. Still unsure whether Norris would have been able to actually go and challenge Verstappen or get past him if he did catch him. The Red Bull has had some floor upgrades recently that it's really utilising, and it's sort of taking the ball out of McLaren's court. So I think that this was sort of as comfortable as Oscar could have had it with Norris leading ahead of him. Other side of the garage, though, Lando, this was a very good race, and he made the strategy work, kept it clean when it counted in the final bits, chasing down Leclerc as well. We saw some brilliant racecraft from the two, lovely overtakes, and the battles lasted more than just a corner at a time, but sort of going on lap after lap. We saw them sort of charging up, jousting. The gap would get a bit bigger, get a bit smaller. They'd go for a move, they'd defend it. Certainly, there was one moment.
We've not seen those two drivers in particular either fight too
have
much.
A long
so
scrap.
It's
novel.
Yeah, it's almost it's usually the case of DRS done sort of thing if we ever see these two fighting in particular, and it's a little bit like when Leclerc was in the hunt in 2022 and he'd been around a couple of years. We didn't know what to expect yet, and it turned out he was very good at battling Verstappen. Like, oh, excellent. But you don't know how that changes from driver to driver, and we got either that with Leclerc in Qatar last year with Lewis, and we were like, oh, both are going to be teammates. That's potentially interesting. We got a little bit of that in the sprint as well, but with Norris, we haven't really seen them fighting at all, have we? So it was nice to see Leclerc go, no, if you can get past, but you're going to have to work for it. It's not going to be as Lando would have preferred it to be, easier.
Yes, yeah, he did say that in the cool down room afterwards. Max and Charles were sort of enjoying
Amused.
sort of lamenting the circuit for being a good one to race around and have some good overtakes on. And Lando was like, it'd be nice if it was a bit easier. And you can see both of them react, sort of going, be better, was sort of their facial
Yes.
to that. But it was nice to see Lando really sort of getting up there, punching around with it, and again making those battles last a lot longer, forcing Charles into making some sort of taking some different lines, putting the pressure on from behind. It was nice to see. He's got the talent in there, and he just needs the wick to be lit to stir it out, and we've seen that a bit more. He knows he's within touching distance of that title as well, and just needs to keep it cleaner than Piastri at this point in time, which does bring me towards the sprint. And I'm not sure what Oscar thought he would get from that move in the sprint. It was clumsy, out of character, and I think he's been a bit rattled for a while. He
To be
should have
clear,
really
which
stuck
move? The
to
one at
it.
the start or the one at T1? Just so I'm absolutely clear.
The one at T1,
Okay.
because I think he should have just stuck it around the outside and then had the inside line for turn two. That would have been a more competitive move, especially while you've got the downforce playing into your element. You can really hit the apex of turn two. But instead, I can see what he's thinking about. Cut under and try and swing around the outside of turn two, which becomes the inside of turn three, and you should have a good exit for sort of the double right of turn 4, 5, and then have the apex for turn 6 on the run down the hill. I can see exactly what he was thinking, but unfortunately, he just forgot there was going
If
to
it
be
was a lap or two later, it
it would
might
have
have
been fine.
been
Yeah,
fine.
there would have been the space to move into, but it's turn one, lap one. I can see why it was called a
Hmm.
racing incident. Those things happen, but there just wasn't that space for him to move into. If it had been any other lap, that would have been a phenomenal move and it would have paid dividends. But just on a lap one, stick with your line, pick your line and stick with it. You cannot be making those late changes.
Yeah, definitely racing assistant as most things on lap one, and especially turn one often are. But I think with the route that Norris then took, going wide as he did, and then coming back in, Piastri, while trying to do his move, but obviously trying to avoid Lando, also then trying to avoid Hulkenberg, who himself was trying to avoid Alonso. And I think it's just that many elements happening in the same place at the same time wasn't going to work. I wouldn't put it on any of the drivers. They're all trying to do their own thing, and obviously they're not going to be polite and say no after you. So I think, yeah, like you say, on the one hand, if it was a different lap, would have worked, but I don't think it couldn't have worked on that lap either. You know, if Hulkenberg and Alonso had been a little bit further back and hadn't been right up there, that would have been it would have been fine. Or if Lando hadn't, if he'd been a bit further back himself, maybe, or even Piastri was a bit further back, it's just they were all none of them were going to what's the word, relent, and they were all being racing drivers there. And while we're talking about that heat of the moment business, I know he apologised for it afterwards, but Zach Brown's comments about Mr. Nico Hulkenberg having no right to be there whatsoever, that was incredibly uncalled for. I thought, I don't know how much of that you caught.
I did
And
catch that. It was
didn't, I get it's a heat in the moment thing, but you're also the overarching figure of McLaren. You kind of need to be able to control yourself a little bit more. And the conspiracy theorist in me says, I wonder if it had just been Lando that got caught up, would he have been as fussed about it? Oh, sorry, no, it was just Oscar getting
yeah,
hit rather.
probably
Yeah, it's wrong driver there. If I was that Brown, no. And I'm just thinking, well, of course Nico Rosberg has a right to be there. He qualified magnificently for the sprint, as we'll get to later, in what was a pretty good weekend for him. Why shouldn't he be up for the fight? And I love the fact that Nico Hulkenberg is Sauber, bearing in mind, taking on Fernando Alonso on one side and Oscar Piastri on the other. Yeah, why shouldn't he be there? He's got more right to be there than you do.
Hmm. he's forced his way up to that point. He's extracted the most from his car. He has every right to be
He,
there.
he's he's doing this thing called racing.
Listen, yeah, Zach Brown was, I think he was out of line for the comment. He did apologize, which I think is good.
Well,
And
it's basic common manners, but it's just
yeah,
frustrating that it was needed in the first place for someone who should, be able to control themselves a bit more. I would have thought.
yeah, I think just
You don't
as
often get that from team
CEO,
principals, I feel.
yeah, the CEO of a motor racing team, you should be sort of prepared to just take a breather for a second when your team crashes before lashing out. And I think,
Where's the first press person that can ask me a question in the heat of the moment so I can really blow my load off? No,
yeah,
not
and
helpful.
again, considering the amount of scrutiny there is around Zach Brown at the moment with that court case that's still rumbling on at home, um, probably not the right weekend to start sort of lashing out at Nico Hulkenberg. But anyway, I think that's McLaren touched on. I think they resurrected what could have been a bad weekend on the foot it got off to, and sort of turned it around performance wise. The difference between Norris and Piastri's form at the moment is interesting, and it does mean we're going to see a bit of a closing of a gap at the top. So there is a lot to look forward to as the weekends roll by.
It's that weird thing of Piastri isn't doing badly. He's just not doing as good.
Yeah, he's not
Which
doing
I
as
know
good.
seems like such a political answer, but it's the only way I can describe it because he's not doing badly. He's still like I think he's only been outside the top 10 once, and that was still Australia. You
Yeah,
know,
and
so
I think
you
he's
can't
won
really
points
fault
in
him.
Australia.
Mm,
Yeah, he came ninth in Australia. He hasn't finished outside the top 10 apart from Azerbaijan and Texas, where he
mm.
DNF'd. Every time he's finished a race, he has
Well,
been in
that
the
was
top.
just the sprint. Yeah,
Yeah. So, yeah, Piastri sort of his form has waned off a bit. And I will say the last time we had an Australian driver leading the world championship with 5 rounds to go was Mark Webber in 2010, I think, who then got
there's
absolutely.
no Germans this time though, so he's still
Yeah,
he's still safe.
he's not got a German teammate to absolutely house one off of him, but there we go. We'll see how it pans out for Piastri and Norris moving forward through the weekends. Meanwhile, still in second place, but it's getting tight for the
Just
constructors for second. Mercedes, Russell qualified fourth, finished sixth. Antonelli qualified seventh and finished ultimately quite an admirable P13, actually, given the circumstances when it comes to that Grand Prix.
yeah, Antonelli, poor guy, just getting yeeted out of the way by Carlos Sainz during the Grand Prix, and I, that was never on as a move. I don't know what he was thinking there. Really, he was having such a good weekend up to that point, and then just decided to bin it, and then add insult to injury, he retires himself, and then gets a five-place grid penalty for Mexico. So really good job there, Carlos. I don't know what you were thinking. But yeah, good for Antonelli to get back up then in the end because it's a track where it's difficult, but you can overtake and you can go racing, and he proved that. And it's again his first appearance here, so that's pretty good from him. Russell, disappointing really. His first time outside the top five since Silverstone. I don't know what's gotten into him. He's just not performing. I don't know. He's gotten soft with that multi-year contract. Should have been a
It's
one-year
he's
deal,
gone
Pato.
lax. Yeah,
Should have been a one-year deal.
they should have kept him sharp in
Um,
that 1 year.
What I did like from him, though, was his attempt on Verstappen in the sprint. I don't think he thought it was going to work. I don't think any of us thought it was going to work, but it was very nice, and it was Ricardo inspired. It felt like in
Yeah,
terms of
you've got to
he's
try.
he's
Yeah,
he's gonna try and be the last of the late breakers there, and it would have been nice if it worked, but I like the attempt. At least they're trying.
yeah. I don't have much to add on top of that for Mercedes. I think we're sort of core on that. It was a bit of a plain one for Russell, but again, a plain one for him is finishing P6. And bear in mind, what's he got ahead of him? Both McLarens, a Red Bull, and two Ferraris. That's sort of what you'd expect based on the
Hmm.
circumstances. Yeah, that's sort of
It's a little bit like Laurent Mekies said on Sunday before the Grand Prix. They got a little bit lucky in some ways on the Saturday with the sprint because the McLarens weren't there. So it's like, yeah, unless something happens, this is what you'd expect, and this is where you'd expect it to be normally. So yeah,
yeah, it sort of exactly plays out how you'd expect. And yeah, Antonelli's recovery was phenomenal to keep those tyres alive on a circuit where getting tyres alive and keeping them alive seemed to be a very tricky thing to do after a spin absolutely filthy tires to clean them up and start getting pace out of the car and then execute your pit strategy was a really good drive from him. And again, one of those ones where you sort of every now and then you're like, oh, this is why they signed the kid. You're like, yeah, this is the promise I think we're after with Antonelli. And again, you've got
Mm.
this is a
It's
teething,
still rough, it's still raw, but you can see it.
yeah, this is a teething year. This is a year getting him settled within the sport, within the way that these guys race. And when we move forward from that, and obviously he's learning well, and he's getting used to these tire compounds, it'll be really interesting to see what he does. So we might as well move then into Ferrari, who had a surprisingly strong weekend, dare I say. Hamilton qualified fifth and finished fourth, and Leclerc would qualify third and finish exactly where he started, giving him another podium this season.
Yeah, I was writing a roundup for this weekend and got Ferrari, and I was thinking, well, they're somehow achieving to be both competitive and not competitive at the same time, such is the way of them, so that, third and fourth, brilliant, but also still weirdly lacking. And I don't know what the heck we do with that. But start with Leclerc, beautiful defensive driving, as we touched on already when he was battling Norris. I don't think he thought it was going to necessarily be somewhere he could stay for the entirety of the race up in P2 once he got past him. But it's what I say a lot of the time during the races. Like, doesn't mean you should make it easy for whoever's trying to get past you. If it's full position, and as long as it's you've not been ordered specifically to not do anything by your team for decent enough reason, we'll get to that later, then yeah, fight like hell. So it was really nice for him, and again, proves for me at least why he's championship material. I think next year could be a make or break year for him, just because, like you say, or like I say, rather, they've got this competitiveness and uncompetitiveness in tandem with each other. So that the third is still great, but you look at the gaps, you look at the capabilities of the car, and he couldn't really go after Verstappen at any point, even if Norris hadn't been there. It felt like so. It's frustrating. On the other side of it, Hamilton post race weekend has said he feels the most comfortable with the car he's had all year, and it's positive steps forward. Um, and I think it's that's encouraging because he's not where he wants to be. He's not where we want him to be. But there's nothing fundamentally wrong with him or the car, I don't think. Charles proves there's nothing wrong fundamentally with the car. It's just he's used to Ferrari. Lewis still is figuring that out. And maybe it was more of a challenge than he wanted or expected. Does get one nice stat out of it though, so I know you've got the other one that's less nice, but first driver to score over 5,000 points in Formula One. So I still think he's got plenty of gas in the tank, and did another miraculous job on the last lap of a Grand Prix 2 weekends in a row to not lose the position he's in because the card suddenly decides
For a
bits
wobble.
of me are not going to work.
Yeah, the yeah, Leclerc, I think we sort of already touched on Leclerc's performance when we were talking about Norris as well. He had that absolutely phenomenal drive, really nicely defended both through sort of the opening stints and again in the later stints as well, just making life an absolute pain for the Lando Norris sort of setup. And yeah, to be able to make the softs sort of be the pioneering driver to run those softs as far as he did, keep them alive, all while having an on-track battle.
That's why I was thinking,
Yeah,
Lando, what do you mean easier? He was on soft tyres and you have the McLaren on you. What more do you want from him?
yeah, the McLaren that all season long has been renowned for being able to make its tires go the distance and keep them in an operating window, where
Mm.
it's in a Ferrari that usually gets to about lap four and has to start lift coasting to avoid overheating its brakes and tires. And meanwhile, Charles is sort of extending and extending and extending a soft stint and still absolutely dog walking you through corners. And you're sort of going, come on, buddy.
You almost wonder if he was told he was on mediums and he just believed them and didn't think to double check. So like, well, there's no reason these can't last. And it's all just in your head what player life actually is.
Yeah, there's something a bit silly going on there, but yeah, with Hamilton, 5,000 points, great career, one of those milestones that I think he'll look back on and sort of
It's stats we don't even know exist.
yeah, we're unlocking new bits of the record book at this point, which is good fun. Unfortunately, one of those bits we're unlocking when it comes to the record book is he has now set the most races at Ferrari before scoring a podium. I think it was Didier Pironi that possibly had taken
Mm.
19 races, so it's now going to take Lewis at least 20 to get a Grand Prix podium with Ferrari. Charles has now also been a year without a race win. His last race win was COTA last year, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not great overall for Ferrari, but at the same time, still pretty good.
Ferrari did win in Mexico last year, though. That's all I'm saying on that.
But if it's hot in Mexico and it's high speed, they might be lift coasting to avoid wearing out the plank because they've still got a bit of a fundamental chassis set issue. But we'll see how that pans out. Anyway, Ferrari out the way, hot on their heels in the constructors, it's Red Bull. Verstappen seemingly remembering that he has the chance to um, take the record for most consecutive drivers' titles at Red Bull off of Sebastian Vettel.
Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah, which so motivated on to get Q1 and then P1. Sonoda, meanwhile, Q13 drove it quite nicely to P7.
Also a driver who appeared to wake up for the most part for the first time in a very long time this weekend. Um, it's got to be the focus on Verstappen, though, because the stat that came about was he was 104 points away from Piastri before Monza. It's now 40, and it obviously even less to Lando, who's in second. So it is on like Donkey Kong and no one else's business. He surely will be dancing around and at the very least taking P2 away from one of them if he doesn't win. It's ridiculous, but not surprising. And if he manages to win the title, it's the biggest gap anyone in F1 history will ever have come back from to win the title by. So, in a year where McLaren has been that dominant, you kind of wanted it a little bit. And I'm an Oscar fan, and I'm thinking, I just want to just run home, get your title. We all want it. But it would be a little bit funny if
Yeah,
Max somehow, because you only need to be 1 point ahead at the end. And we've seen that before.
yeah. I mean, when it comes to Verstappen versus Norris, you've got this interesting dilemma of do you want to take away Vettel's record of
Records are there to be broken.
or do you want Piastri or Norris to take away the fact that Lewis Hamilton was the last driver to win a title for McLaren? You're sort of stuck between these 2 points of which line do I want a new line written underneath? And you're sort of like, oh, this is an interesting way of doing it. But equally, like you said, this would be the greatest points overhaul in F1 history to take a championship. There's no other driver that would ever really do that apart from the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, and Max Verstappen. If anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him. And he is driving, as I've written in my notes, in his 2023 prime of being untouchable, meticulously clean every race weekend, doing exactly what he needs to and nothing more.
It's his 2023 prime, but with the added bonus of he's only started now thinking a little bit about it. He's not thought at any point this year that he's actually in for a shot. So he's doing what I've said about Hulkenberg and a bunch of other drivers further down. They're just in this really sweet spot of if we get in points, perfect. If we get anything more than that, perfect. We'll just keep taking the chance and the next chance and the next chance until we can't take any more chances or we get what we came for. But you don't actually think you're going to get what you came for. And now it's very possible. But he doesn't have the pressure because if he loses, he thought he was probably going to lose anyway. And if he wins, he is going to laugh his ass off at McLaren, and rightly so, because that's where the maths is so logical and befuddling at the same time that you can win a constructors championship with what 7 races to go, and yet both drivers will lose the title to a team that is P4 at the moment in the constructors, but only 10 points away from P2. And that's pretty much with one driver doing about 90% of the work there. It's staggering.
I can tell you statistically how much of a percentage of the work Max Verstappen he's doing. He's doing 92.45% of the work. If you want
Don't
it.
get me wrong, Yuki did well this weekend. He had a good sprint opportunity, which he took advantage of. And he did well in the Grand Prix. Admittedly, very, very lucky to not get a penalty for the Behrman kerfuffle, which we'll probably talk about a little bit so that we've got something to say about Haas. But yeah, Max is still the one doing, like you say, 92% of the work there. So the fact, regardless of where he finishes, even if he still finishes third at the end of it, you're going, yeah, look how difficult you two made it for yourselves and the team as a whole, because he had no right to borrow a phrase from Zach Brown in being there.
Yeah, it was a very interesting scenario. And Yeah, I think Verstappen absolutely on it. There's nothing really to say about Verstappen. He's just driving absolutely pristinely. He's sort of operate pushing that car to 99 and a
He's the
half.
definition of simply lovely. I feel like he's
Yeah,
finally actually now embodying it. It's felt like something he would just say when he dominated, but this is feel it's that medium of
genuinely
I can
feels
just
simply
drive,
lovely. Yeah.
I can feel it, and I'm getting the results to go with it.
The new floor setup has brought the car's balance back to where he wants it, and he's able to drive it as we'd seen him in previous championships at 99.5% to extract the absolute maximum of it without that little element of risk. Just get all of what he needs to out of it and be happy.
The last thing I want to say is I was getting photos from various F1 teams for the roundup I was writing, and there was a brilliant one that reminded me of the one from Australia. You know, when they're coming around the corner when it started raining, both McLaren are off the track and Max
Mm.
is there in the background, perfectly fine. This one was a close up of the two McLarens
Oh, and it's with Max
smashed together
Murphy.
in the sprint,
Oh,
and you've just got Max in the background driving off, and it's just the
disappearing.
back of his car. I'm like, that's a perfect sequel. If we can get one more of those, if he wins, can we have one more of those by the end of the season to have this nice pick, a season in three kind of pictures, you know?
Mm. It would be an interesting way of looking at it. Yuki was messy this weekend, but got points from it regardless. I agree with you. He got lucky he didn't have a penalty come from that contact with Ollie. I think that I want to sort of change what I'm thinking here when it comes to sort of my criticism of Yuki's move there. Potentially it's because I have a bit of a soft spot for Ollie Behrman. I think he's a genuinely nice person, having met him. I think that it's just a racing incident. I think that's how he got away with it. It was Ollie having a look up the inside. He was a long way back. Yuki was entitled to not necessarily shut the door on him, but certainly take and stick to his original racing line, which is the one that he had been taking. If you watch back his previous laps through those corners, that's pretty much the same line that Yuki had been
Then
taking.
take that initial line at the start and don't give the driver you're battling the opportunity, and then don't react to that move.
Would there, if you watch the steering wheel, if you watch his inputs, he doesn't react to Behrman's move because he knows that he's allowed to stick to his line. So what he does is essentially goes into a double left-hander, has to adjust because the second half of the left-hander is a tighter turn, which is where you then have to crank on a bit more lock. And that's what happens. It's just unfortunate that that's the moment that Ollie Behrman caught him, had that run of overspeed, thought he can move to the inside and essentially do the current standard of Formula One overtaking, which is get up the inside, force the other driver wide. And he just didn't make it. Unlike Sainz, he sort of managed to bounce his way across the grass, dirty his tyres, loop it, and set off again. Behrman still got points in the end. It's not as many as he could have gotten. I think he essentially halved his points tally, but he got
I still
lucky.
think it's mad that it wasn't even noted because we've seen
Yeah.
lesser crimes be noted and penalised for in the past.
I think it's
And
because there
the
wasn't
fact that there
contact.
wasn't even anything. Oh, well, in that case, let's really push the boat out on a bunch of things in the future and go, well, as long as there's not contact, it's fine. It just opens up an unnecessary kind of worms, which in an already messy race stewards need to sort their shit out situation.
Yeah, we'll see
It's
how that kind of
just
worms looks.
stick to some damn principles and rules which you do have in front of you.
We'll see how that kind of worms looks when it gets opened. Importantly, decisions are coming for that Red Bull second seat. Apparently, they're going to be announced post Mexico. But when you look at how Hajar is driven, how Iwasa is running in Super Formula, Lawson having refound his feet, there's a lot of drivers looking at that seat. Also, terrible race etiquette from Red Bull too. Fined €50,000 for re-entering the track during the formation lap. This was
That was
also
very bizarre, that.
very bizarre because they were also one of their engineers was noted for attempting to remove Lando's reference tape for his grid spot, and Twitter has gone awash, obviously laying into Lando as it loves to do, going, "Oh, I can't believe someone of his sort of years of experience still needs tape laid out to point out where he needs to park his car." If you've sat in an F1 chassis, you know how low you sit, you know how tricky it is to get yourself aligned within the box, and you know there are penalties if you don't get yourself aligned within the box. That's why at the start of like the second year of running these
I also
chassis,
don't think he's the only one that does it anyway.
no, I think
So
Hamilton has it. I know a lot of other drivers have it. It's not at all uncommon. That's why they extended the
you
yellow
have
card.
so many things you can criticize Lando for if you want to. You don't need to start making things up just for the sake of it.
Yeah,
Go on the genuine things. This is everyone's got this.
to quote Carlos Sainz when he was at Ferrari, just stop making things up. But yeah, so an interesting one from Red Bull all over the shop this weekend, but ultimately very interesting in how it progresses the championship forward. Meanwhile, Williams, who went from having an absolutely brilliant time in the sprint race to an absolutely terrible time for them in the Grand Prix. Yeah, shame about Sainz's move on Antonelli, ended his race. It wasn't really on, and he did try and mitigate it with the brakes, but still, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. Steady for Albon, made up from his duff quality. The race pace in that car is clearly very key. They can utilize it, but he is long overdue a good race, and I think we'll see it when it comes.
Yeah, shame for Albon because that qualifying lap, it was slimmest of margins as well for track limits, and you think about the fact that it was the very last moments of that session. He was having to avoid all that traffic and COTA being COTA with the harshness of the track limits as well in so many places. You're just you were frustrated for him so much there, and in the race he couldn't do too much there because as has been the case for most of the races this season, it's still pretty much a qualifying championship. It feels like if you don't get the job done on Saturday, it's hard to turn things around on the Sunday. And yeah, after the Saturday where they got double points in the sprint
Mm.
and P3 for Carlos, I mean, the safety car came out at a convenient time. I think it would have been nip and tuck towards the end. He may have still got it, but again, it was nice to see, and it was why the shunt he did with Antonelli was so frustrating. It's like you're better than that.
Mm. We've seen from both drivers they're better than what we ultimately saw from them across this weekend. But hey, we get what we get. I mean, Albon made up 5 places. You look at what other drivers who are moving forwards made up. Ignoring the driver that we're about to get to, you look at what Sonoda did in that Red Bull, made up 5 places. Look at other drivers that sort of qualified out of position per se, and the fact that they made up places often is sort of yeah. Well, Hajar moved forward 4 places. The only real sort of flaw in this argument, Hulkenberg moved forward 3. The only real flaw in my argument is Stroll, who moved forward 6. But anyway, Williams out the way. We'll move to Aston Martin. Alonso qualified 10th, finished 10th, picked up some points. Stroll, meanwhile, qualified 18th, nothing unusual there, finished 12th, which, again, no points, but made a surprising impact on the field.
I'll deal with him in a minute. Like you say, he baffles in any way. I think in the Grand Prix, it was a nice bounce back from Alonso after getting caught up on the turn one, lap one incident in the sprint. And he was doing his best Carlos Sainz Singapore 2023 impression towards the end because Lawson was closing in and Stroll was behind Lawson, and it looked like Fernando was going, no, no, no. He turns mine, back off. And I'm just going to push you ever so gently back into Stroll's DRS so that he can deal with you. He won't get past you, but you'll have to defend a little bit to make sure that he doesn't. And then in the meantime, I can run away out front, which I thought was quite a good example of Fernando still very much being more than capable of being there. I don't know if you saw as well after the sprint, he posted quite an amusing thing on his story on Instagram, essentially saying his luck for the season had flatlined and he was now recharging for 2026. On the other side of it, Alex Jakes was very nearly amusing in commentary. He caught himself midway through a phrase that you are very familiar with when describing Stroll's attempted move on Ocon. He went, that was ambitious, but
Rubbish.
And then stopped himself before he realised where he was going and that he was doing live TV commentary. But it does essentially sum up what Stroll was doing in that sprint race because that move, I mean, we talk about some of the other moves that weren't on. That wasn't ever on. That wasn't in the same postcode. It was maybe not even the same state. I don't know why he thought that was ever going to work. And then why on earth did he drive off with his battered car afterwards? That was never going to make it around the rest of the circuit. You've got a perfectly good Marshall point right there. Why drive off? And I think the best comment I saw about that was Royal thinks he's Schumacher, and it was a picture of Michael from Spa '98 after driven it a full time with the tyre hanging off. But yeah, it's not the way we want you to emulate Michael Schumacher. But thanks for trying.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that move on Ocon was absolutely baffling. And again, if he'd made it work, would have been marvelous, but he didn't. So
Yeah, and I don't think anyone ever thought it was going to work.
I think another driver may or may not have been able to, but quite late into
Not Stroll.
quite late into a tyre stint as well. It's a big ask from that Aston Martin, especially Alonso squeezing what he can from the car and finally getting a reward for it as well. It's been a little while since he's had a fairly comfortable race, it seems. Yeah, underwhelming a weekend overall for the lot of them. I think that there should have been a bit more on offer from the Aston Martins. And also the weekend where it emerged that Stroll considered packing it all in 2024. So,
Mm.
yeah, not surprising when we're seeing these sort of performances.
Rogovic really wishing that had happened.
Yeah, we'll see. I can't remember if he's contracted for next year or not. I have a sneaking suspicion he is already. So Stroll, that is not Dragovic.
Oh,
So
of course he is.
yeah, so yeah,
He's contracted until he's not, and we won't find that out until far too late, which is already about 8 years too late at this point in time.
yeah. So we'll see where that one leads. But Aston Martin, I think there was, as there has been for a lot of this season, a lot of untapped potential. Their only advantage is the fact they'd already sort of racked up a lot of points and got themselves sort of further up the constructors' order. Otherwise, I think we'd be talking about them in the same sort of derogatory terms we use for Alpine, where it's just like consistently underwhelming because there should be more from this team, but there just isn't at this point in time. And their only saving grace is the fact they've got points on the board. Sauber, however, Hulkenberg qualified 11th and would finish 8th. I don't know if you heard his radio as he crossed the line. Gimme, 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 gimme.
Hmm.
My points here. Absolutely over the moon to finally picked up some points for the first time since Silverstone when he was on the podium.
Yeah,
Bortoleto, meanwhile, a bit of a ropey one, Q16, P18. Probably would
second
have
pit
been,
stop buggered him essentially.
yeah, pit stop really ruined him. It was not a great weekend. Again, coming here as a rookie, a lot to learn off the cuff. But hey, Hulkenberg first points in Silverstone. I can't fault him there. And potential for Bortoleto to have a good home race, given how good the Sauber looks in its current form. It seems to be a lot more controllable. They again with the home crowd behind him, I think we could see Gabby sort of extricating a bit of pace and having a fun
As
time.
long as it's not a wet race, because rookies in the wet this year haven't gone well. So
Mm.
it's fingers crossed anyway. Yeah,
And
Hulkenberg. It's just
temperate
such a
dry one.
shame, such a shame for Hulkenberg that he couldn't also get points in the sprint because that midfield battle in driver standings is so close. Those points would have been really, 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 really nice. And you saw him get P4 in the opening practice session. You thought, oh, that's nice. And then he goes and sticks it on P4 for the qualifying session. You think, oh, okay. And then we're robbed of a really nice story there. And yeah, okay, we got signs, but we've had signs on the podium already. And I know we've had Hulkenberg, but I think Hulkenberg, we want more of that because signs we're used to seeing him a bit more regularly up there, regardless of the outfit he's with. So once again, Zach, yes, he bloody does deserve to be there. He's putting in all the hard work.
Mm. Yeah, when you speak of that sort of that battle for position at the moment, Hulkenberg 41 points. Then we go to I think is that Sainz on 38. Then we jump down to no, we've got someone else stuck in the middle of this battle as well. We've got Hadjar in there on I think 39, Sainz 38, and then Alonso 37. So it's very tight at the moment
An
in the
extra, what, 7 points for P4 in a sprint would have been quite handy for him.
yeah, it's very tight at the moment for what is essentially the battle for well, Hadjar is 10th, Sainz is 11th, Alonso is 12th, Stroll is a long way off on 13th, but yeah, ninth is essentially what that battle is for Hulkenberg at the moment. So yeah, interesting stuff still going on around that end of the field. Alex Albon still somehow completely untouchable in 8th.
Hmm.
Just sort of
It's that strong. It's the Aston Martin strategy of bank points early, but
yeah,
one driver.
yeah. Antonelli, now he's found his feet, is sort of pulling away from Albon a little bit. But again, only takes one weekend for that to turn around. Antonelli's on 89, Albon on 73. He can close that up quite quickly. If Antonelli starts to sort of struggle again, we go to a few more circuits.
One DNF, one victory, done.
Yeah, or we just start going to circuits where sort of Antonelli isn't quite so familiar. They've got the challenging conditions. I'm thinking Las Vegas,
Well, aside
Qatar.
from Abu Dhabi, he's not been to any of the other venues before. So
No, but Mexico and Sao Paulo are relatively straightforward. Sao Paulo, if it's wet, could be a problem for Antonelli. But Las Vegas, it's cold, it's very low grip, it's a street circuit. And Qatar, it's
car
fast
racing
paced,
warm.
but it really takes it out of the car. It's very hot. It could be a struggle for Antonelli. So we could see Albon with a bit of experience really closing the door there as well. Anyway, Sauber out the way. We'll get to the Racing Bulls. Lawson qualified 12th, finished 11th. Hadjar qualified 20th after essentially having his binned it, basically. Yeah. And then finished 16th. So, yeah, rebuilt it and went from there. But yeah, it's an off weekend for Racing Bulls. A bit like I sort of said for Aston Martin. I think there was more they could have had this weekend.
think Liam didn't look off the pace at any point. Um, it was just you're going up against Fernando Alonso in the Grand Prix. It's going to be tricky. Um, I did like his comment post qualifying because Yuki was blaming him for his qualifying being bad for a mysterious reason. And Liam was asked about it and just said, I've absolutely no idea what he's talking about. It's just such a Liam Lawson style comment, I thought, and did make me chuckle. Hadra, yeah, I think rare mistake definitely from him, given the season, and you forget he's still a rookie. He's going to have a bad weekend every now and again. He's just maybe saved them up to be later in the season. So we see him crashing qualifying like this. I mean, it's so unexpected because of how good he's been that we don't really mind because he's still in his first season and he's been so good already. So yeah, it's a little bit like we were saying with Antonelli with some points. We don't mind too much because we weren't necessarily expecting you to be as good as you have been.
Yeah, I think when they've sort of set a high tide mark that we sort of anticipate them being able to stand up to, I think is tricky.
And
Uh,
Antonelli was the only one who really had that. All the other rookies have been going, hey, you're good, but we don't know really what to expect from you. So we
yeah,
don't mind if you do badly.
yeah,
And they've all exceeded expectations. So when they do inevitably do badly, like they did here, in perfectly fine ways,
mm,
because we've seen this happen to more experienced drivers, you go, that's all right, brush it off,
yeah.
you'll be fine next weekend.
And also sort of Lawson talking about sort of Yuki, it's interesting because it suggests there's still not animosity between the two drivers, but there's
He's not
clearly
there to make friends.
he's not there to make friends, but also there's clearly that seat up for grabs. And Yuki's again, I said it about his racing getting scrappy, but there's obviously other things that are weighing on his mind
Oh, mind you.
that other drivers in other Red Bull affiliated seats might be sort of aware
No
of.
one else looks uncomfortable in those
Yeah,
other three seats, put it like that.
yeah. I think that's a very clever way of putting it. I will say also good job to the team who did well to do a rear wing change on the grid after the rear jack failed and they're putting it up onto its dollies as well. That's a fairly involved and technical job. So good job, good on them for getting it turned around. I do love it when we see the Red Bull teams sort of working
They always
fast.
get thrown a challenge every now and again, don't
Yeah,
they? Oh,
we saw it
right, we
when
also
they
have to think about this through Budapest with
yeah
Max a couple of years ago. Well, for
yeah they
Christ's
rebuilt
sake, right?
Max's car. They did it with was it Checo's car they rebuilt in the rain and Spa as well in 21, I think.
Not
Um,
that it was needed too much in the
Not
end,
that it
but
was
yeah.
needed ultimately, but it did mean he could actually do like the two laps that counted as a race to
Hmm.
collect his half points. But it's when you see Red Bull operating and the Red Bull affiliate teams operating at that absolute peak, you're like, this is the golden Red Bull that we always wanted. The Red Bull that sort of comes out and you go, oh, you weren't
The Red Bull that gives you wings,
yeah, like when
quite
they first
literally in
entered
this
the
case.
sport and everyone looked down their nose at them, oh, it's a sugary energy drinks provider. They're just here for a good time. And then all of a sudden they come out and they're doing their sub 2 second pit stops. They're doing their sort of super quick, well put together sort of rebuilds, and you're like, oh, they've practiced and they are a good racing outfit. And that's what you want to be reminded of when it comes to the overall sort of architecture of the sport. And you see the teams doing motorsporty things, you go, yeah, this is why I'm here. Um, Speaking of teams doing motorsporty things, potentially another learning step on the learning
One
curve.
of your
Haas.
loosest tangents ever.
Yeah,
Connect things with.
a team that needs to learn how to do motorsporty things. Let's say Haas Esteban Ocon qualified 17th, finished 15th. But you can only really give him one of those places because obviously Sainz was ahead of him and DNF.
Hmm.
Behrman
Got to be in it
qualified
to win it.
Yeah, got to be in it to win it. Behrman qualified eighth, finished ninth, but that was after he had that sort of awkward moment with Sonoda. Behrman, admittedly, running upgrades this weekend. Ocon still waiting for them, but hopefully, this is finally the weekend that Haas learns that just sticking Ocon on hards and getting him to do the race from there isn't necessarily the
Maybe
best
next time
strategy.
it'll work,
It didn't work the billion other times they've tried it this season.
but maybe next time.
I can't see that working. Um,
They've committed too much to it now to give up on it. And they've got to keep going
Giving
until
up
it
at this
works.
point,
It's their version of Alpine 100 race plan. We've said we're going to do it. We don't care how many times we've got to start it. We're going to do it.
it's sort of if they don't do it from here onwards. It's a complete admittance that they were wrong, that they're sort of like, but it's sort of proving the point.
Mercedes changed the concept of their car just the right time before they just have to stick to it for the rest of the regulations. Haas don't have that option. They've stuck to it way longer than they should have, and they've got
Yeah,
to stick to it now.
they're too far down the road this season to sort of go, maybe we should try a different a strategy with Esteban Ocon. Not even a different one, just a strategy would be useful. But yes, that sort of really hobbled his race when he had that sort of unnecessary pit stop pretty much paid to him. Behrman, though, pretty good. And hopefully they are able to blend this setup well in with the rest of the car as they move forwards. We've got some unique circuits coming up. We've got the very low downforce Mexico still to come. So if they can get that upgrade onto Esteban's car, hopefully that will sort of move them up to be jousting around for those points around sort of the bottom end of the field again. And that's where sort of races get exciting when you've got those sort of drivers and teams that emerge into the points paying positions, that all of a sudden it sort of puts a bit of an interesting spin on things. Of course, on the drivers you expect to be there aren't there. It forces strategies, forces drivers to actually go racing. And that's when things get interesting. And Behrman did that this weekend with Yuki, and unfortunately, sort of paid the price for it a bit at Yuki's hand.
Well, it's like Antonelli, you say, it was a good result despite the circumstances, and in Behrman's case, he had a good Grand Prix despite the attempt on his life. So Ocon, unfortunately, just didn't have a good weekend through no fault of his own. I mean, imagine you're him in that sprint. You're just driving along, minding your own business, and then bam, out of nowhere, you're the one friend of this driver, and he comes driving into you out of nowhere, and you go, my guy, what did I ever do? I've been nice this whole time. Why did you decide to just launch yourself like a kamikaze pilot at me? What were you trying to achieve?
It was a bit of an odd one, but yeah, Behrman a bit miffed about that sort of Yuki thing, and he did call him out for it in the media pen. But I'm assuming they're just going to
Hmm.
shake hands and make up for it. An interesting statistic I've just come across, however, fresh in: Carlos Sainz in a Williams has scored as many points as the current championship leader over the last three Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz 22 points since Baku. Oscar Piastri 22 points since Baku.
It was unfair considering where she finished, but yes.
Hmm. Yeah, considering one of them is in a Williams, one of them is in the Constructors' Championship winning car, you sort of
Hmm.
wondering what's going on there. But if
Also, one of them finished one of those races, the other one didn't.
one of them probably could have finished one of those races if he hadn't just absolutely barreled it into a wall. That's on him.
Same could be
Anyway,
said of Carlos actually this weekend, so that works both ways.
true. But at least Carlos scored points in the sprint, which really helped his argument there. Anyway, where are we going? Alpine. We're going to think of something to say about Alpine now. Gasly qualified
Don't
14th
worry,
and
I've got
finished 19th, and Colapinto qualified 15th and finished 17th. And Thiemo, you've got something nice to say about their livery.
did like the splashy yellow.
It does look good.
I said it a lot about Sauber last year because we didn't have an awful lot to say about them, and I did like that livery. This one, they worked nicely with the pink and blue, and hope
Mm.
they keep it going with that. They finally cracked that code. See, that's another example of sticking with it until it worked, and it finally worked for them this year. Nothing else has, but that livery did,
No,
and it worked
even
together
team
with the
orders
splashy
didn't work
yellow.
for them.
No, and that was just such the confusing thing there. I mean, what was he trying to achieve? You're ordered to essentially lift and coast to manage the car because your team is not sure that you're going to be able to get to the end of the Grand Prix. And you go, now, boys, I'm going to go overtake my teammate and cause a right ruckus despite Max coming up and going to lap us all anyway. And then it's all for the high and lofty position of E17. Congrats, I guess. I'm sure you can really be happy about that when you go home later.
Yeah, it was an interesting move from Colapinto. Overall, the team has been pointless since Belgium. You could argue they have been pointless all season long, really. I did love Colapinto's, but he's slow comment on the radio before just absolutely dive bombing Gasly. And I think this is what Formula One has been missing since.
It's that comment with zero self awareness as to his own capabilities all season.
Yes, yeah, like you've scored points this season, Franco.
Hmm.
But I feel that the sport needs Franco Colapinto in the same way that like the 80s and 90s needed like the terrible drivers in sort of like the life F1 cars and stuff, where that they'd just be there to cause like a crash and make it a bit
We've
more
got one of
exciting.
those though. He's called Stroll.
Yeah, but he's not really been doing a great deal of that. He's just been sort of pootling around minding his own business and then launches it into his best friend in a ridiculous dive bomb into turn one. But
See,
also he's not often that spicy on the radio. Colapinto, you know he's just going to say shit to stir the pot, and I like that. And he's the terrible F1 team of the 90s that we need at the moment.
would you like a fun fact?
Go on.
If Colapinto had finished P3 in Austin, and nobody else had scored points, which would have been impressive considering he still would have come third in the race, but nobody else would have scored points,
Hmm.
he'd still be last in the championship. And if he finishes in second in Mexico, he needs to be damn sure Bortoleto doesn't score any points, because if he did, he would still be last. It is getting to the point now where by the end of the season, it's very possible that if somehow Colapinto won the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, you would still be last in the Drivers' Championship. That is the caliber of driver that we are dealing with in that second seat. And I know the Alpine isn't good, but Gasly has been able to get 20 points out of that car. So you'd expect at least one or two. I mean, heck, the stake drivers, well, one of them, Joe, managed to get some points in Qatar last year at the 11th hour. If he can't even get one, what are you renewing the contract for?
Yeah, I mean, let's say
Because I was thinking
Gasly's.
maybe the team radio was, and the subsequent move was him going, well, I've got my contract signed, I can go balls to the wall now. Or it's him going, I'll show them, this is why they should retain me. And you go, no, that is
Yeah,
not why. You just pissed them off by disobeying them.
yeah, Gasly's best result was a sixth at the British Grand Prix, which earned him 8 points. So what, 2 8s are 16, 3 8s are 24. If he did that and Bortoleto scores no more, it'd be enough to claw his way up to 19th. The lofty, lofty heights. Perhaps no one's pointed out to Colapinto that while he has scored 0 points, he does at least at the moment beat Jack Doohan on countback. Perhaps that's what he was concerned about. He needed that higher position just to beat Jack
Main,
Doohan.
I mean, he's been in that for a while, but I'm pretty sure that happened after he went over 5 races because he just has more opportunity.
It happened at his fourth race, which was Canada, when he finished 12th and therefore outranked Jack Doohan, who up until that point had a
13th, I'm guessing.
highest finish of. Oh no, no, no! Jack Doohan finished 11th in Bahrain. So then how the hell has Colapinto got ahead
Maybe
of him
he's
on
finished
countback?
11th twice or something.
No, no, Colapinto hasn't finished 11th at any point in time. He's finished. Well, hang on, I'm looking at qualifying positions there. That's why I'm getting my numbers wrong. Um, that's
So
why.
that'd be impressive even for Collins, but Jesus.
Um, Doohan's highest finishing position, sorry, is 13th, which was achieved in
I was right
China.
then.
Um, and then Colapinto's highest finishing position is 11th, which he achieved at the Dutch Grand Prix. So, yeah, someone just needs to point out to Colapinto that it's all right. You've got P20 in the bag in a 20 driver championship. You don't need to make these silly moves. Anyway, Alpine out the way. We'll move into our winners and spinners. Thiemo, your winner, please.
I know it's a very weak one, but it's Max Verstappen. It can't be anyone else, really. He's, like I say, he's managed to cut that 104-point deficit down to 40, and there's so many more than 40 points available for 5 more Grand Prix and at least one more sprint race. So, game on.
Fair enough. Um, my winner, Charles Leclerc, masterful tyre preservation through a soft tyre stint, despite his efforts. 7 points shy now of staying in the title battle, so he is no longer in contention for the big shiny trophy. So it's down to 4 drivers: the 2 McLarens, Max Verstappen, and somehow George Russell.
That the only thing funnier than Verstappen taking it away from McLaren would be George Russell doing it.
It would be
I'm
peak
here
George
for
Russell
that
to
as
do
long as I
nothing,
can make
win
it happen.
championship.
Pretty much.
It'd be the way he's
Um,
driven this entire season of do nothing, win championship.
I mean, you look at somewhere like Vegas and Brazil, calamities have happened there in the past, messy races, and George has been all right in both of those locations. If all three of them either finish outside the points or just won't finish at all, and he does what he's done in both of them and win, that would just be, again, amusing. Not necessarily saying that he'd do it, but just be way closer than you'd expect him to be.
Hmm. He
I'm here for it.
he could surprise us and sort of just pop out of nowhere like a P2 in the drivers. You're like, where did that come from? Um. Anyway, spinners. Thiemo, you've gone for Franco Colapinto, and you have a fun fact.
Well, my fun fact was the P3 thing I used just now.
Ah,
I couldn't resist waiting on that one because it is a fun fact. Yeah, Frank Colapinto, because Jack Doohan was robbed. What has he done to have warranted anything this season? That,
yeah.
you know, we made this argument either in here or off recording at some point about some of the drivers that could have stood in instead in Formula 3 because of them not scoring any points and at least give someone else a go. Here is a prime example in the top tier of motorsport. There is the old joke for the last best part of 10 years of here are 19 of the world's best drivers and Lance Stroll. We might have to soon say 18 because if Colapinto stays around for much longer, I don't see how else we'd describe it accurately.
Mm.
And you kind of similarly backed me up on this.
I, for me, my spinner is again Alpine. Like, how are you team ordering at the back of the field, managing the cars?
Then not even managing that.
Yeah, managing the cars so you can get to the end of the race because apparently they're that bad they just need coaxing along to just finish, let alone finish competitively. And a badly pit stopped, badly strategized Gabriel Bortoleto has hunted you down. And if it weren't for the blue flags, was probably going to come past you. And you're like, oh, come on, guys, you're Alpine, you're Renault, you're
So
one
you
of the
won
legacy
titles.
teams in the sport. You should know what you're doing, but I will say, however, another thing that's just sprung to my mind. Do you remember Max Verstappen purposely making contact with George Russell at the Spanish Grand Prix early this season? George is on an absolute flyer towards the end of the race. He's got fresh tyres on,
Yes.
blows past Verstappen, and Verstappen just comes off the brakes and dive bombs him into, like, what is it, turn 4, 5, I think.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously that forced them to swap positions and held Verstappen back, obviously, a few points. Wouldn't it be funny if that's ultimately what costs Verstappen his 5th championship this season? If he comes down to it and he loses out to Piastri by
Costs him in favour of Russell.
oh, now that would be funny. Oh, can you imagine how much Max Verstappen would lash out with borderline violence at that? That would be funny. I can't wait for the scripted line from George Russell on that
It's
one.
not me, it's my inner father from Yoss. It's Yoss. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's my father. I'm sorry. I should be better than this. Anyway, with that out of the way, predictions review: 0 points for pole position. You get 1 for Verstappen win. No one gets points for the fastest lap, and I, I get points from the McLarens making contact, which
That would be nice and give it to you for the sprint because you didn't
yeah,
specify
it
where.
happened this weekend, and
Yeah,
it happened in a timed racing session, and it was good collision.
it was proper contact.
Yeah, it
It
wasn't
took them
just a
both out.
bent wing end plate. It was Oscar Piastri airborne into his teammate, which I think is worthy of the point there.
It counts.
Fantasy Formula One review for Austin F1 Main 1 that gets 263 points. Panchek's Novartis Formula One team 240 points, and Essegurk 237 points. Interesting name there. The Cat Dad's PC.
Gurkha, I believe it's a German one.
Uh,
You're eating gherkins.
there is a surprising amount of Germans in our fantasy F1 league.
For lack of a German Grand Prix, yeah.
Yeah. The Cat Dad's P16, Timo's podcast team P28, Jaffa Cake Racing P30. I must have done better than that this
The
week.
highest. No, that's the highest you had. We all did terribly.
Ouch. Catherine's Curse P61 and Kiwi Burners P63 with a minus 28 point weekend for them as to be expected. Overall, the victory 3,423 points. D. Ticklias 3,320 points and Big Reach 3,230 points. It's still relatively close at the top. Catherine's Curse P5 on the Curbs P6. Alonso minus 32 points for the weekend seems very harsh. It does a little bit. I think I have Alonso in quite a few of my teams as well, which could have been what cost me. Cargo and Moustache P16, the Mixing Pot P20, Kiwi Burners P63. Are they into negative points yet? They must be.
99 points. I don't know how.
99.
I think because they've got Mercedes and another not bad constructor, so they keep getting negative points for the Grand Prix weekend, but they still just about somehow balance it. But overall, and they have not yet to break into triple figures. But
We need a weekend where those teams also have a bad race. Because obviously, if you
All they need is to reinstate Jack Doohan and Liam Lawson to Red Bull for weekend so that he doesn't have two inactive drivers in his team.
I know I just want to see it get into negative figures overall. Like I need like Mercedes and his other driver team to
Oh yeah, just all of them to just
all of them DNF, and therefore he gets a lot of negative points, which should be enough to take him like backwards. Anyway, that's all we've got time for on this episode of the Undercut Podcast. We'll be back soon for a preview of the Mexican Grand Prix. I won't be here for that one. Thiemo will be, and he's got some special guests lined up. In the meantime, though, Thiemo, where can you be found?
You can find me over on the Paddock Chronicle, where I have an aforementioned United States Grand Prix roundup. There are a couple of tongue-in-cheek comments about a couple of drivers for everyone to enjoy, so do go and appreciate that. And this week I've got 2 interviews out over on the coast with Angeli Krempit and Aurora Angelucci, so go and check those out when they're out, which by the time you listen to this probably will be.
Nice. And in the meantime, if you'd like more from me, you can find me, of course, on the internet as @JesseOnCars on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you want more of me in written form, you can find me writing for Classic Car Weekly. And we've got a podcast over there, the Classic Car Weekly podcast. Loads of episodes of that to go back and listen to. Otherwise, like I said, we'll be back with a preview of the Mexican Grand Prix in very short order.